is Trauma Awareness Month. While car crashes or sports injuries lead to different types of trauma, according to UW Health Trauma Center, the most common type of trauma are simply falls. Most falls happen inside the home, and it impacts people who are usually older than 65. Health experts say to be more aware and identify the causes of falls in homes, like flooring, different footwear or vision impacts. Some tips can be to make sure floors are not wet, cleared of any clutter like shoes and rugs, or mats are not loose.
So many of our elderly patients lose their independence or have devastating injuries from a ground level fall. And anything we can do to help people avoid that and maintain their independence and stay home longer is the best.